listening to Let's Talk About Ethics with me, Evie Wenting. Today's guest is Rad Samra, an experienced EEO and compliance leader, and we are diving into how leadership, culture, and accountability shape the entire heartbeat of an organization. Hope you tune in. Hi, everyone. This is Evie Wenting with Ethical Edge Experts and our podcast, Let's Talk About Ethics. It is my pleasure today to welcome back Rad Samra. Hi, Rad.
Hi, Evie. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited about this conversation we're going to be having about disability accommodations in the workplace. What is the future of those states and currently what's happening and how it works so we can help our listeners to navigate through that process and making sure that is done correctly. So I will give you the floor.
Absolutely. Today, I made a post about the changes that's taken place in the actual reasonable accommodation process and how the process is becoming more employer employee driven versus employer driven. And I talked about that. And I want to highlight two important cases that the verdict on those cases is going to set a precedent for future cases. I also want to touch a little bit about the disability and the process itself and what happened since the inception of ADA to now. Obviously, I'm not going to cover the entire time period, but I want to talk about what makes accommodation more accessible to employees in order and the circumstances, the right environment for them to enable them to request those accommodations. That's what we will be covering today. Anything that you want to talk about before I start my talk, or you have anything
Sure.
to add?
So this topic is definitely near and dear to my heart as someone who has a condition that it doesn't go away and it gets aggravated with and flares up with certain things. So having accommodation, it's a process I certainly went through. And when that was happening, I didn't necessarily feel supported. And I think that's something that many people who have disabilities of one form or another don't always feel supported from the company. It feels like the process is more check in the box kind of the thing, not to get in trouble and not to get reported. So I am excited that there are changes to be made, and hopefully those changes are in the right direction. And it is my goal as always, making human, people centric compliance programs. So, if we can help the listeners or viewers here with navigating the process and give them pointers on how to make it better, it's really good because in turn, we are helping people. I always believe when people are content and happy in their workplaces, they are more productive, they're more creative. In turn, the company sees it in their bottom line, happier customers, better product, more productivity overall. So there is a really good reason why we should get this right. And we should certainly give people with disability the tools and the space, whatever that may look like, needed because there is talents hidden everywhere and it gets clouded by not doing it the right way or not doing it in the way that it actually helps people because we're only doing it to check in the box. So I'm super excited about this conversation. I can wait to hear how it's changing. And in the spirit of what I just said, I can wait to hear from you in your experience what you feel would make those programs better for companies.
Oh, absolutely. And unfortunately, Evie, I wish I can tell you your experience is a special case, but in a lot of ways, really, a lot of people experience the same thing when it comes to requesting accommodation, and the process itself can be very frustrating. And but what we know about the research shows that accommodations significantly improve performance, right? Employability, and you improve your ability to be a promotable individual, just like any other individual in the company who's doing a good job. But the statistics, unfortunately, does not back up that a huge gap exists between the need of accommodation and those actually receive them. And this is not just about employers. Many individuals with IWDs, individual with disabilities, don't disclose their or disabilities or ask for help, even when invited. And not to blame the individuals themselves, but has to do with just like any other complex process. It has to have a fertile ground, an inviting environment, and other psychological aspects afforded to the individual in order to feel comfortable in requesting accommodation itself, right? Um, there's not a whole lot of research from academic point of view that has been done about exploring the psychological factor behind these reluctance and why people don't feel encouraged to ask for reasonable accommodation when accommodation is needed. It's really a win-win type of situation, because if a person dealing with something hinders his or her ability to perform her job, the employer should be encouraging, inviting for this individual to get the accommodation he or she needs, because it ultimately reflects on productivity, right? Unfortunately, not all employers and many employers lack this mindset. They feel like they're giving you something you don't deserve sometimes, or they're giving you something that is different, that makes you different from other employees. And a lot of them don't realize equality and equity is not the same thing. Just because they're giving you something in order to be equitable doesn't mean the process has to be equal. And this is going to take a lot of education and a lot of awareness on the employers, officials and managers to understand the crux of reasonable accommodation, why it's needed and how it could be conducted.
Yeah,
But
you hit it right on the head. It's like it's almost coming from the other side of the people who have to ask for it. It's like you have to be in a really bad place when you get to asking for it. You said it. You don't want to ask for it. Maybe it's something you should have asked 6 months ago or a year ago, and you were trying to hold on and trying to do your best before. I mean, I will say most people, right? Before you got to ask for the accommodation. And then the process, like you just said, is kind of doing it, but it feels like
feels like a favor, like you're asking for
you're
something you don't
yeah,
deserve.
you're not deserving of this special treatment when you truly don't know what people are dealing with many different conditions. And I'll say this one here because this one for longest time has been frowned upon when you said it, is
Yes.
Lyme disease, right? So finally, right now, people are coming out and talking about the long effects of Lyme disease and what it could do to your body neurologically, psychologically, and in medical terms as well. But when you would say to someone, "Oh, I have Lyme disease and I need help," and there's so many people who suffer with this, and especially, I mean, it goes all over the United States, but especially where we are here in the Northeast, you were shamed. You were looked at like it's in your head and you're crazy. You were really not supported. So I'm happy that number one, things are changing for Lyme patients because now there's more awareness and more people talking about it. High profile people are talking about the importance of treating people and getting them space and, proper treatment. And that translates to the workspace as well. Like, can you imagine being really disabled by this disease and you could not file for disability because nobody believed that you had it? You had to find
Yeah.
doctors, find a way to explain how this person is not able to do something. So then that translated to workplace. So number one, I'm happy we're having that conversation, but even more happy that now the process of trying to work on the accommodations, the request process, and then the interactive process that should be happening with employees, that there's some changes to it. So if you can walk us through
Absolutely.
those, that would be great.
Absolutely. You're touching on a very important subject, another subject that's not widely discussed in the HR realm, And in academic research around this topic, you're touching about the invisibility versus the visibility
Ugh,
of the disability. Because when people see you on a wheelchair, for example, or if you have some type of blindness or anything that is visible, is much more easier to understand from a sympathy standpoint and understand that this person needs disability reasonable accommodation for the disability. But when the disability is invisible, it really makes it hard for a person, unless they are really entrenched, understand the process itself and how disability can affect you without seeing it. So when somebody look at you and they see you as a healthy individual, walk and talk and all of that, it's hard for them to understand why are you asking for reasonable accommodation, because from all what they see and the lack of medical knowledge, we're not medically trained individuals and we're not supposed to make judgment. But human nature, you take a look at someone and you see him healthy and all of that, and you become less sympathetic when they ask you for reasonable accommodation. So you're touching on a very important topic that really needs to be discussed. A lot of guidance need to be given, a lot of education needs to be done in order to make people aware that, hey, just because you don't see it, this person is not suffering or doesn't need help in order to increase his or her productivity at work. So that's a very important thing. The other thing I wanted to give you some numbers based on my own research, telling you that studies have shown as many as 67.6%, to be exact, of individuals with disability withhold accommodation requests.
wow.
Yeah, even when employers explicitly invite them to self-identify, and that's because fear. Before I go to the why, think about it. That's like 7 out of 10 people who could benefit from accommodation choose not to ask. I mean, that's a striking number to me.
So I have a question on this ask part here. When people are applying for a job, at the end of it, at some point before they click submit, there is always this ask, are you with a disability? And
Right,
some people will say yes, some people will say no, and some people will say, I don't want to tell you what it is. So,
right. I don't want to disclose. Yeah.
right. Do you should companies be really taking more look at it when people do disclose at that point to see if, should that be the opening of the conversation? Or because right now it's just treated as a survey and I don't know that there is much done with the data.
Yeah.
So should we want to encourage people with disabilities to say yes because it invites the conversation, or do you think that's more like a detriment at the hiring process?
So employees hesitate to ask for accommodation from beginning of the hiring process, including starting the application. They fear retaliation. They feel like if they ask for accommodation or disclose disability, the employer is not going to favor them, although they might be qualified to do the job. And unfortunately, this is not just cynicism. It's not like somebody being cynical, but in the past there are a lot of cases shows that one person requested a reasonable accommodation for a disability, they have been retaliated against. A recent example I can give you, and it's not making a lot of news, but Society of Human Resources Management, SHRM, has been in the news lately. They offered someone a job. They gave a job offer to an individual, and when she asked for to bring a dog for her disability for comfort, they withdrew the offer. And so you can read about it. You can go on the news just search it, or even on LinkedIn you can find it. But this, I'm not trying to point out Sherm. Sherm has a lot of problems. I'm just trying to illustrate why people hesitate to ask for reasonable accommodations sometimes. Now, do all employers do that? Individuals do that? No, not everybody does it. But I think in order to make the request or for disability, or the invitation for disability, more easy or easier for the applicant, I think language which states that you are assured not a disclosure of disability does not affect the hiring process or things of that nature. You put it in a legal language where you can inform the individual that it's not involved, it's just trying to help you out, and it's not going to be involved in the decision process. It kind of ease up. Maybe some individuals are would be more willing to disclose their disabilities in that sense.
Right.
But why fear? Fear of negative perceptions, career repercussions, and vulnerability of disclosing a disability. But ironically, not asking for what you need can lead to decrease in performance or putting your job at risk. So even though you might have that fear and it might be a complex process to go through, the alternative of choosing not to disclose your disability and ask for accommodation can have a negative effect on your performance. And that's what people need to keep in mind.
Right.
But just touching on, and I want to talk about two cases, and I want to talk about how they're changing the threshold and the paradigm shift in a reasonable accommodation. But just to touch on the psychological aspect of asking, we need to look beyond the surface and understand the psychological barriers at play. When people ask for disability, my research highlight there have to be self-efficacy. Do you believe I can successfully navigate the accommodation request process? And doubt and fear of rejection can be paralyzing for individuals who really need help. If they don't believe that they can successfully navigate it, then they might be hesitant to ask for reasonable accommodation. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I said there has to be the right ground, the fertile environment for a person to go through the process and ask for it and feel comfortable about it. Because if they don't feel like they can successfully navigate the accommodation process request, if they feel it's a hindrance, it's an uphill battle, they will be hesitant to ask for reasonable accommodation. Another thing is the outcome expectation. What do I expect? Will it happen if I ask? We talked about the repercussions and the retaliation that could take place in the process. But if I anticipate negative reactions, I'm less likely to speak up, right? Or to say that I need reasonable accommodation. Your supervisor does not treat you well to begin with, you are going to be hesitant to ask for reasonable accommodations simply because of the overall treatment of you as an employee. So, job satisfaction, if you're dissatisfied with your job, you may be less motivated to seek accommodation, feeling it's not worth the effort or it's going to add to my problems at work, right? And the other thing, the fourth factor I identified is the affective style. How do I typically experience and manage my emotion? It's an emotional process, and it's not easy to talk about personal things and disclose them to someone at work. And those who are more reserved or have the tendency toward negative emotions may be less likely to disclose those needs. Those are four factors I identified. I'll just sum them up again: self efficacy, outcome expectation, job satisfaction, and effective style can really hinder your ability or enhance your ability, depending on whether what spectrum you're on in a reasonable accommodation process.
Thank you, Rod, for such insightful conversation. This recording concluded part number one. Stay tuned for part number two.